I want you to close your eyes for a second. Well, maybe not if you're driving right now, but just imagine that ultimate fantasy.
Oh, yeah, the one we all secretly nurse when we're just having a terrible day.
Right. The classic zero to hero moment. Maybe you hit the Powerball jackpot, or you land that impossible C-suite promotion, or some distant relative you've never met leaves you this massive estate.
The dream.
Exactly. You move from scraping by to just having absolutely everything. The money, the access, the freedom.
It's the happily ever after, right? It's literally the structural backbone of basically every fairy tale and blockbuster movie we've ever seen. Cinderella gets the castle, and the credits roll.
Yeah, the credits roll. The assumption is always that once you cross that finish line, the struggle is just, it's over, you've arrived, the music swells, and you are done. But, and this is the massive question we're really grappling with in today's deep dive, what if that moment of arrival isn't the end of the movie?
Right?
What if it's actually the beginning of a silent, psychological horror story that literally nobody warns you about?
It's a terrifying thought, but it is the central premise of the material we're diving into today.
Yeah, and we've got some incredible source material for this.
We really do. We're looking at a text titled Scriptlessness, a missing dimension in Zero to Hero Tales. And this is by Benjamin Adai and Antwi-Boasiako. And I have to say, right off the bat, this isn't just some dry sociology textbook.
No, not at all.
It's this fascinating mix of memoir and really heavy cultural analysis.
And the author, Benjamin, he isn't writing from some ivory tower. He has lived one of the most extreme trajectories I think I have ever read about.
It is genuinely staggering. I mean, we're talking about a man who starts his life in a mud cottage on a cocoa farm in rural Ghana.
Wow.
And he thinks he was born in 1979, but he actually can't be sure because there were 0 birth records. His mother literally went into labor in a storeroom after walking 20 kilometers.
So just painting the picture for you listening right now. No electricity, no running water, illiterate parents, total subsistence living. And yet, the book finds him years later holding a PhD, working as a high-level executive in risk management in Munich, Germany. He's flying business class, dining in Michelin-star restaurants, living the absolute dream.
On paper, he is the ultimate success story. He won the game.
Yeah.
But the book is basically his confession that winning came with a massive hidden price tag.
Right. The mission of this whole deep dive is unpacking that price. Because he argues that when you migrate from one social class to another that rapidly, you suffer from a condition he calls scriptlessness.
Scriptlessness.
That word really stuck with me. It's such a specific feeling.
It's incredibly evocative, isn't it?
It captures that exact anxiety of walking onto a stage, the curtain goes up, the spotlight hits you, and you suddenly realize, wait, I don't have the lines.
Right.
I don't know the blocking. I don't even know what play we're performing right now.
Precisely. You're just totally exposed. And to explain this, the author introduces a term from his childhood that I think perfectly frames our whole discussion today. He talks about the JJC.
The Johnny just come.
Exactly. The Johnny just come. In Ghani boarding schools, the JJC was the new kid, the novice, the one who hadn't been initiated into the unspoken rules of the dormitory. If you were a JJC, you were essentially walking into a minefield of social codes you just didn't understand.
And you're going to step on a mine.
You're definitely going to step on one.
Yeah.
But the author expands this concept beautifully. He says, you can be a 40-year-old CEO in a bespoke suit, but if you weren't born into that world, internally, you are still a JJC.
You're still the Johnny just keep come inside the boardroom.
Always. You're constantly scanning the room, trying to figure out how to sit, how to speak, just how to be.
He illustrates this with a story that is honestly equal parts hilarious and heartbreaking. It involves his very first encounter with a water closet, a flush toilet when he got to high school.
Oh, man, it is so vivid. And you have to remember, this is an incredibly bright student.
Yeah, he's a scholarship kid.
Right. He's smart enough to earn his way there. He's intellectually gifted. But he has never in his life seen indoor plumbing.
So he uses the toilet, but he has absolutely no idea how the mechanics of it work. He pulls the handle and the water starts rising.
And to him, it looks like a tsunami.
Yeah.
He thinks he's broken it. He thinks he's about to flood the entire building. And in that moment of sheer panic, he tries to reason with the appliance. He's standing there shouting, calm down. Calm down, toilet.
Say, calm down, toilet. I mean, I laughed out loud reading that part, but then you stop laughing and you realize what's actually happening in that moment.
It's a trauma response, really.
Yeah, and it's a complete failure of what sociologists call cultural capital.
That is the key distinction. He had the intellectual capital. He belonged in that school academically, without a doubt.
Right.
But he lacked the cultural script to perform the most basic biological function in that new environment.
Right.
And that fear, the fear of the rising water, it becomes this potent metaphor for his entire corporate life later on.
Because he's always waiting for the water to rise and expose him as a fraud.
Yeah.
He uses another metaphor that I think really flips the script on how we view the burden of poverty versus the freedom of wealth. He talks about the myth of Atlas.
Right, the Titan condemned to hold up the sky.
Yeah. Usually when we hear that myth, we think, poor Atlas. If someone just took that heavy sky off his shoulders, he'd be so relieved. He'd be happy.
That's the logical assumption, right? Take away the burden, you get happiness.
But the author argues the exact opposite. If you have carried a crushing weight your entire life, like the sheer weight of extreme poverty, your muscles, your bones, your entire posture has developed specifically to sustain that load.
You're leaning into the weight just to stay upright.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you suddenly remove that weight,
You don't just stand up straight, you fall over.
you fly off into space, you lose your gravity, you become totally disoriented.
Because the struggle actually gave you structure.
Exactly. Poverty is terrible, yes, but it is familiar. It provides a very clear, unambiguous script. Survive.
Right, get through the day.
When you achieve that zero to hero success, that organizing principle just vanishes. You are suddenly light, but you're also completely unsteady. You don't know how to walk without the burden pushing back against you.
That disorientation seems to be where the scriptlessness really kicks into high gear. And nowhere is that more obvious than when he enters the corporate world in Germany.
Oh, yeah.
He's left the farm, he's got the advanced degrees, and he walks into the office. And he realizes immediately that the game is rigged.
It's not just rigged, it's being played on an entirely different field. He uses a football analogy here that I think makes it so easy to understand. He talks about Chelsea Football Club and their historic home unbeaten record.
86 games without a loss at Stamford Bridge.
Right. And why do you think that is?
Well, the home advantage. You know the pitch. You know exactly where the dead spots in the grass are. The crowd is singing your songs. You get to sleep in your own bed.
Exactly. And in the corporate world, the people who were born into the middle or upper classes, the patricians, as he calls them, they are the home team.
Right? They've been practicing on this pitch their whole lives.
They learned the corporate script at the family dinner table. They know how to make the right small talk about skiing or vintage wine. They know how to challenge a boss without sounding insubordinate. They are playing at home.
Which inherently makes the class migrant, our JJC, the away team.
Always the away team.
And think about what that means for your daily energy expenditure. If you are the away team, every single interaction requires calculation. You are constantly checking the turf, you're watching the crowd, you're trying to figure out the referee's mood. It is exhausting. You are working twice as hard just to stand still.
He gives a really specific example about lunch meetings that hit home for me because, I take lunch meetings completely for granted. You grab a sandwich, you talk shop, no big deal.
Totally normal for us.
But for him, coming from his specific cultural background in Ghana, eating and talking simultaneously was a massive taboo.
It was considered incredibly bad manners. You respect the food and you stay silent. But in corporate Germany, lunch is where the deal gets done. It's where the actual network is built.
So he's sitting there at this fancy restaurant with a fork in one hand, absolutely paralyzed.
Yeah, because if he eats in silence, he looks antisocial, or worse, arrogant to his colleagues.
Yeah.
But if he talks while he's chewing, he feels like he's violating this sacred, deep-seated rule of his upbringing.
He is trapped between two conflicting scripts, and he's unable to perform either one naturally.
It perfectly highlights the difference between money and class. You can win the lottery and get the economic capital overnight. You can go buy the bespoke suit.
Right.
But you cannot buy the cultural capital. You can't buy the instinct of what to do with your hands at that lunch table.
And that gap, having the fancy title but lacking the internal software to run it, that leads to what psychologists call the panic zone.
Yeah, you bypass the growth zone entirely.
You aren't learning anything, you are just surviving. And I think this is where we really have to talk about imposter syndrome.
We hear that term all the time now.
All the time. And usually it's framed as this purely internal confidence issue. Like, oh, you were good enough. You just need to believe in yourself. Do some power poses in the mirror.
Exactly.
Ah.
But the author pushes back on that narrative really hard. He argues that for a class migrant, imposter syndrome is not a delusion at all. It is a completely rational assessment of reality.
A rational fear. Now that's a hot take. How is feeling like a fraud rational.
Well, think about the elevator story he tells in the book. He's working in this high-rise in Sunyani, Ghana, and he would walk up endless flights of stairs every single morning, just sweating through his suit before work.
Just because he wanted the cardio?
No, because he was utterly terrified of the elevator.
Oh, wow.
He didn't know how the buttons work. He was afraid he would get trapped or just look foolish in front of the patricians. So, in that specific context, if he felt like an imposter in that modern office building, was he wrong?
No.
No. He genuinely didn't know how to use the building.
So the feeling of, I don't belong here is actually deadly accurate because culturally you don't. You are a tourist pretending to be a local.
And that pretending is what sociologists call passing.
Passing. Okay, now, is this different from code switching? Because we hear a lot about code switching these days.
They're very distinct. Code switching is a skill. It's adapting your language or your demeanor to fit a specific context, but crucially, while maintaining your core self. It's like choosing to wear a different hat for the weather.
Right, you're still you under the hat.
Exactly. Passing, on the other hand, is hiding your core self because you fundamentally believe it is unacceptable in that space. Passing is fear-based. It's wearing a mask, not a hat.
He uses the story of Hector from the Iliad to explain the sheer danger of this.
Yeah. So Hector kills Patroclus and steals Achilles' armor. He puts it on and struts out into battle. Now, to the casual observer, Hector looks exactly like Achilles. He looks invincible. He is passing as the demigod.
But the armor doesn't actually fit his body perfectly.
Right. And more importantly, Achilles knows exactly where the weak spots in his own armor are. By wearing someone else's armor, Hector actually makes himself more vulnerable than if he had just fought as himself.
That is such a profound warning for anyone listening who is trying to fake it in a new job or a new social circle right now. If you try to pass as upper class, the actual upper class will see right through the chinks in your armor.
And they will destroy you. Or honestly, you will destroy yourself trying to maintain the illusion 24/7, which perfectly leads us to the Diderot effect.
Ah, Denis Diderot, the French philosopher, the guy with the dressing gown.
The famous scarlet dressing gown. So he was gifted this beautiful, incredibly expensive robe. But when he put it on and sat in his study, he suddenly realized his writing desk looked cheap and shabby next to this gorgeous fabric.
So he bought a new desk?
Exactly. But then the rug looked terrible next to the new desk, so he bought a new rug. Then new chairs.
It's a chain reaction of consumption.
Unending consumption. And for the class migrant, passing is this exact same expensive trap. You buy the luxury car to fit the executive image your colleagues have, but then your apartment address doesn't match the car.
So he has to move.
Right. You move to the nicer neighborhood.
Yeah.
Then your old clothes don't match the new address. You are constantly upgrading your entire life to match a script you can barely even read.
And the real tragedy here is, while you are spending all this money and energy trying to cement your status in this new world, there is a massive gravitational pull coming from the old world that you left behind. We really need to talk about the black tax.
This is one of the heaviest parts of the book for me. In the author's culture, and honestly, in many collectivist cultures all around the world, there is a deep, unbreakable social contract. He quotes this Akan proverb: "When a single tree faces the gale, it snaps."
Meaning you only survive because you are part of a forest.
Right. The community, the extended family, they all sacrificed to get you out. They pooled their meager money for your school fees. The saying over there is, if someone cared for you while you were growing your teeth, you must care for them when they lose theirs.
Which is beautiful in theory. It's reciprocal care. It's literally how human communities survive.
It is beautiful. But when the economic gap becomes that extreme, when one person is sitting in Munich earning euros and the entire rest of the family is in a rural village facing literal starvation, the reciprocity becomes a crushing, impossible burden.
He talks about the wicked uncle abroad stereotype.
Yes. If you leave for Europe or America, the assumption back home is that you are essentially picking money off trees.
Right, the streets are paved with gold.
Exactly. So if you don't send cash for every single medical bill, every school fee, every funeral back in the village, you are seen as selfish. You become the wicked uncle.
There's a specific moment he describes that really got to me. He's in Geneva, Switzerland. He's made it. He's walking by the lake. It's picturesque, peaceful. He stops and buys a coffee. And suddenly, the taste just turns to ash in his mouth.
Survivor's guilt in real time. He automatically does the math. He thinks this cappuccino cost €5. My cousin back home needs exactly €5 to buy malaria medicine right now.
How do you enjoy the coffee with that kind of life or death math running in your head?
You don't. That's the whole point.
No.
You are never fully present in your own success because you are constantly calculating the cost of your leisure relative to their actual survival. It creates this constant low-level hum of anxiety that never turns off.
It's a total no-win scenario. If he gives away everything, he goes bankrupt and loses his footing in Germany. If he holds back to build his own life, he violates his deepest moral code.
And that stress isn't just psychological. This is fascinating. It actually changes your physiology. The author introduces the Baker hypothesis, which shifts our conversation from sociology straight into biology.
This is where the zero to hero journey actually gets dangerous for your physical body.
Yeah, the Baker hypothesis, it's also known as the thrifty phenotype hypothesis. It suggests that if a fetus or a really young child experiences extreme scarcity or malnutrition, their body physically adapts.
It programs the metabolism to be incredibly efficient.
Right. It learns to hoard every single calorie because it genuinely doesn't know when the next meal is coming.
Which is a brilliant survival mechanism if you're in a famine.
It saves your life in the village. But take that exact same body with that programming and drop it into a corporate environment in Munich.
Sedentary job, high stress, highly processed foods, total abundance of calories.
The body is still frantically hoarding calories for a famine that is never going to come.
Wow.
The old biblical phrase, new wine in old wineskins. The biological script is completely outdated for the new environment. And this is exactly why we see such disproportionately high rates of diabetes, obesity, and hypertension in populations that migrate rapidly from extreme poverty to wealth. Their bodies are literally fighting their own success.
So you're fighting your mind with imposter syndrome, you're fighting your budget with the black tax, and you're fighting your own pancreas.
Yeah, it's a war on all fronts.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most intimate battlefield he covers, love.
Marriage and class. The author really dives into what happens when a JJC marries a patrician.
Right, someone who grew up poor marrying someone who grew up wealthy.
He notes this fundamental clash in how they approach everyday life. The patrician, the wealthy partner, usually takes a very managerial approach to existence.
Because they can.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They plan their emotions, they plan their leisure, they genuinely believe they can control outcomes because, historically, their family always could.
Whereas the JJC, coming from total uncertainty, is used to chaos. They know firsthand that plans fall apart.
Right. So the JJC might be impulsive, or they might be incredibly rigid and paranoid about money because they constantly fear losing it all. And this causes massive friction in the relationship. But the author actually offers a solution here, and he goes back to his absolute favorite subject, the toilet.
Yes. The toilet bowl theory of relationships.
I know it sounds super unromantic, but hear him out on this. He points out a paradox in basic household hygiene. We all assume the toilet bowl is the dirtiest place in the house.
Well, yeah, because that's where the waste goes, obviously.
Correct. But because we know it's dirty, what do? We clean it, we scrub it, we pour bleach in it constantly.
Yeah.
As a result, microbiologists will actually tell you that the inside of your toilet bowl is often much cleaner than your kitchen sponge.
Because we completely ignore the sponge, we think the kitchen is safe, so we just let the bacteria breed in the sponge.
Exactly. That is a concept called risk compensation. The author argues that a mixed-class marriage is exactly like the toilet bowl. It is a known high-risk area. The difference is in how you view money, family obligations, and manners. Those are germy topics.
So if you ignore those differences, if you just treat the relationship like the kitchen sponge and say, oh, love is blind, class doesn't matter, it will fester and get toxic.
Spot on.
Yeah.
But if you treat it like the toilet, if you openly admit, hey, this is a dirty, difficult area between us, and you scrub it with honest, uncomfortable conversation, you acknowledge the class gap every single day, then it can actually be the cleanest, healthiest part of your life together.
You have to actually admit that you are operating on different scripts. You can't just pretend love conquers all without doing the scrubbing.
Precisely. The scrubbing is the love.
As we start to wrap this up, I want to talk about how he lands this plane. Because after all this struggle, the anxiety, the guilt, the health issues we just talked about, you might honestly expect him to say, don't do it, stay in the village.
But he doesn't say that.
No.
He is very clear that he would not trade his life to go back. He completely refuses to romanticize poverty. The farm was incredibly hard. The lack of medical care was deadly. He appreciates the safety and the opportunity he has now.
But he ends with the cautionary tale of King Midas.
It's the perfect myth to close this out. Midas wanted the golden touch. He prayed for it. He got it. He had the ultimate zero-to-hero moment. But then he tries to eat his dinner, and it turns to hard gold. He hugs his daughter, and she turns into a statue.
He gets absolutely everything he wanted, but he can't digest any of it. He can't connect with it.
The author describes Midas as having a golden garden with a lead heart.
Wow. A golden garden with a lead heart. That is a haunting image.
It really is. And that is the ultimate paradox of scriptlessness. You gain the whole world, but you lose the intuitive, natural sense of how to actually live in it. You lose the connection to the simple, unscripted humanity you started with.
But here is the twist that I think makes this entire book relevant to every single person listening right now, even if you haven't moved from a cocoa farm to a boardroom. The author suggests that scriptlessness isn't just a class issue. It's a human issue.
Oh, absolutely. He argues that we all face moments of scriptlessness in our lives. When you retire after 40 years and lose your job title, who are you? What's the script?
Right. When you get divorced after 20 years, what is the script for dating in your 50s? When a loved one suddenly dies?
Anytime the role you've played your entire life just evaporates overnight, you are left standing on that stage without your lines.
We are all JJCs at some point.
Every one of us. We are all Johnny Jest. Come in the face of major life changes.
And his advice for when that happens?
Stop trying to pass. Stop wearing actor's armor. If you are new at something, just be new. If you're hurting, be hurting. If you don't know the rules of the room, ask somebody. The exhaustion comes from the pretending, not from the learning.
That is such a powerful place to leave it. So here is the question we want you to carry with you today as you go about your life. Where are you currently passing? Where are you wearing armor that doesn't really fit, terrified that someone is going to spot the gap, instead of just admitting that you are figuring it out as you go?
It's a scary question to ask yourself, but answering it might be the only way to stop the panic and actually start living your life.
So true. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into scriptlessness. It's a lot to process, but hopefully it gives you a brand new lens to look at your own journey and the scripts you're trying to follow. We will catch you on the next one.